How do we deal with North Korea? We're going to talk to somebody smart about that coming up on the Armstrong and Getty Show.
Do you fear that Kim Jong-un is unstable, not able to make reasonable decisions on this front?
All indications, Brett, by intelligence agencies, and there have been a number of independent psychologists have done analysis as best they can. All indications are that he is not crazy. He may be ruthless, he may be a murderer, he may be someone who, in many respects, we would say by our standards is irrational, but he is not insane.
That's interesting stuff from the Secretary of State. Donald Trump said the same thing in an interview in the last couple of days, and I don't know if this is a orchestrated maneuver by the administration to let you know, hey, we think you're sane. We're going to deal with you as a sane leader of a country.
Little respect,
or it's
little
just
olive branch.
Just what they determined, or what?
Well, let's discuss that more with Eric Gomez, policy analyst for defense and foreign policy studies at the Cato Institute. Mr. Gomez focuses on the regional security issues, U.S. military strategy in East Asia, China's modernization, militarization, et cetera, et cetera. Eric, how are you, sir?
Doing well. Trying to make sense of what's happening now with Tillerson's statements over the past 24 hours.
And where is your head at this point with what he said?
It's mixed. I think that some of the things he said were relatively interesting and could have a breakthrough effect, but on the other hand, it seems like a lot of U.S. position hasn't really changed. So, for example, he talked about at the UN today that if North Korea took some steps to reduce the threat posed by its missiles and nuclear weapons program, then talks could be considered. But he didn't specify what such steps could look like. So it's just really hard to tell whether this is a serious U.S. change or just some more of the same.
Well, I got a question for you. What would have to happen to end tensions? Would they have to give up their nukes for us to ratchet down at all?
I think in the U.S., under the U.S. assumptions, that is the ultimate goal, right? Give up the nukes. There is a possibility of negotiating to some sort of freeze or some sort of locking in the quality or the technical capacity of their current missiles and then using that as a sort of a jumping off point to get a better thing. But so far, no one in the U.S. government publicly has said anything about a freeze being the goal of negotiations. The goal is still get rid of all your nukes.
You know, if I'm North Korea, especially given the experience of Georgia in recent years, if you're not familiar with it, Google it, the idea of disarming is really unappealing. I think
Oh, you
North
mean the
Korea,
Ukraine? When Ukraine had those, we said you can give up your missiles, we'll protect you, and then they gave up their not missiles, nukes, they gave them up, and then...
Right, yeah, Georgia didn't get much help either, but you're right, yeah, it was Ukraine. I think that's a really tough putt to get them to trust anybody under any terms enough to disarm.
Exactly. I think, and especially the Libya case is something that the North Koreans learned a lot from, too. Because Gaddafi had a nuclear program in the works. He gave it up to the United States in a negotiated agreement, and then the U.S. helped lead the way with the NATO air cover in 2011 that ultimately led to his downfall and death. So if you want to stop the United States from threatening regime change, the really good way to do that is to have a nuclear weapon.
Heck, if Saddam had nukes, we wouldn't have attacked.
Yeah, pretty much. It's much harder to engage in offensive military operations against a country with a nuclear weapon, even if they don't have many.
Eric Gomez on the line from the Cato Institute. I can't help but notice, Eric, that you're analyzing the United States as much as you are North Korea, and I resent it. Let's see. The other point that I want to make in all seriousness, because I didn't get the actual degree, but I'm kind of a freak for this sort of thing. Didn't get your hoity-toity master's degree from Texas A&M, but. In terms of inspections, that's always a difficult and delicate thing with any regime because of legitimate national security and secrecy needs. And so how do you have a full inspection of somebody you recognize has legitimate needs for secrecy? And if you're talking about a hermit kingdom that is terrified of any contact of its people with the West or the rest of the world, how in the world do you have any sort of inspection regimen?
I think that's a fair concern, and it would probably involve some diplomatic wrangling that I can't really foresee. But I think what is the alternative then? It's like, yeah, that's a difficult bar to hit, but if the alternative is trying to schwack their forces on the ground in the opening stages of a preemptive conflict, but risking them firing first, or is it just sort of wait and do nothing until they have an ICBM with a nuclear warhead that can hit the United States? Because that's also a worse outcome from our perspective. Right. So it's sort of like, yeah, that's a hard thing to do, and that's a fair point. But I think the alternatives are pretty nasty and worth avoiding.
What would you do if you were in charge?
If I were in charge, I'd probably take all mentions of denuclearization completely off the table and just say, leave a very sort of open-ended requirement to begin negotiations. Don't place any preconditions on North Korean behavior to start the process. And see what they do to respond to that, right?
Well, why not make it
easier for them to come to the table?
Why not make it about the rockets or the missiles? Just as long as you don't have a rocket that can reach us, go ahead, have nukes.
Excuse me, Japan over here, can we include us too?
Well, then Japan can decide whether they want to invade North Korea or not. But it's off our radar. I mean, we don't have to worry about it anymore. And he still protects himself because we're not going to try to overthrow them and have them wipe out South Korea. So it's still the deterrent.
Well, right. Well, one way to sort of change this calculus is just change how the U.S. thinks about the North Korean problem militarily. Because right now we talk about ideas of killing Kim Jong-un or killing or destroying his forces on the ground early, trying to disarm him. But what if that wasn't the primary plan? Because it would be a very difficult plan to execute. Then you have South Korea and Japan also thinking about doing that same thing. And that really creates the crisis situation, because then the North Koreans feel the pressure to use their weapons before they lose their weapons. So I think even just sort of thinking about the problem from a military perspective in a different way and focusing more on a defensive posture to say, okay, yeah, we won't try to attack you first, but any attack that you do will be met with an overwhelming response. That's a pretty credible threat to make, because we have a lot of troops in South Korea, and they can't match us on a nuclear level.
Right.
And that's a situation where we can't. It might not be politically very palatable, but I think militarily it could work, and I think militarily it makes a bit more sense. And then you start to sort of, then every little crisis doesn't have this great escalation potential, right? So you help tone down the heat on a sort of crisis-to-crisis basis, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, would that it were. Eric Gomez of the Cato Institute is on the line. When you're doing a deal like this that we're discussing with North Korea or maybe with Iran, aren't we, meaning I suppose the West or whomever's involved, aren't we just saying, hey, we want to buy 5-10 years. We want to buy 10 years of you not having effective nuclear weapons. What'll it cost us? Because the idea that anybody's going to actually disarm is just not credible to me.
Yeah, and I think the hope is that by buying the time, you provide conditions for the enemy's or the adversary's calculus to change, right? So with Iran, yeah, it's not a permanent agreement. You might buy 10, 15 years, however long those provisions last. But in the interim, you give them sanctions relief, you get them more involved in the global economy, you hopefully change their perception of their interests, vis-a-vis the United States a bit. And so that way, when the provision runs out, they can say, well, we could try and restart the program again, but it would be tough, and, we'd have to not necessarily start from scratch, but we'd have to restart from where we left off, and that'll be a pain in the butt. Or we can just continue doing this new approach that has worked out well for us. So I think that's the hope. And we'll have to see with Iran if that hope gets played out, because another factor in this too, and you talk about analyzing the U.S., it's really tough to make policy across administrations, because Trump especially really doesn't like what the Obama administration did in general, and came into office on promises to sort of dismantle his legacy in a lot of ways. So that leaves the Iran deal on the table. North Korea in the 90s agreed to something called the Agreed Framework with the Clinton administration that was imperfect, but it slowed down their progress. It bought some time. And then Bush came into power and threw out the Agreed Framework in 2002, and then the North Koreans tested their first nuclear weapon in 2006. So, again, like, U.S. domestic politics has a lot at play here, right? Because
Sure.
maybe the Iranians decide if Trump does things that violate the agreement, then they might feel, well, why should we adhere to it for its full length? Why not? They are already breaking it. Why shouldn't we?
Hey, a short answer, if you could, is the guy crazy or not?
No, he's not crazy. He's incredibly rational, just brutal.
And finally,
and fat.
Do you believe that Kim Jong-un's father, Kim Jong-il, actually scored 18 consecutive holes in one in a round of golf?
No, I don't believe that.
You've seen the classified intelligence on that, huh? All right. Eric Gomez of the Cato Institute. Eric, we'd love to have you on again to talk about China and the South China Sea and that sort of thing as that comes up again. But thanks for the chat. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good one.
You too. Well done.
We've been wanting to get him on for a couple of weeks, but it turns out the timing is perfect, as we have sent 300 Marines back into Afghanistan, raising the very same flag that they lowered 3 years ago over this 6,500-acre base that we've got there, because the Taliban have taken back over various parts. So we're still at it. Back at it again in Afghanistan. Going to try to fix that country.
Aaron O'Connell is a historian, a U.S. Marine, a veteran of the Afghanistan war. He recently left the White House, where he served as Director of Defense Policy and Strategy on the National Security Council staff in the Obama administration. He is also, notably, the author of Our Latest Longest War, Losing Hearts and Minds in Afghanistan. Welcome, Mr. O'Connell. How are you, sir?
Very well. Thanks for having me.
Would it be acceptable if we were to call you Aaron?
Please do.
Okay, great. We're really glad to talk to you. It's Well, why don't you tell us your view, in short, of Afghanistan today and our effort there?
Yeah, right. Take an enormous topic and try to describe it quickly, right?
Well, I think, believe me, we'll get into the details of the thing, but the premise of your book is essentially...
The premise of the book is essentially that we've been at war for 15 years and that it hasn't gone very well. One of the initial premises of what we've been trying to do in Afghanistan for 15 years, the sort of initial assumption was that Western forces with guns can build up an Afghan government that can secure and govern its own people safely while still battling an active insurgency. And so what we did, I recruited a number of authors that served with me in Afghanistan, all of whom are both veterans and scholars. So they're all credentialed academics as well. And we said, well, let's test that theory. We have 15 years of evidence. Let's see what the evidence says about how well we've done in this longest of American wars. And we found that the results have been really rather mixed. Some things have worked well. Most things have not. And in fact, in a lot of cases, things are getting worse.
Well, to back up your claim that things have not worked well, hit it with some of the statistics we have on like how many people we train up who disappear, or the roads. I really like your commentary on how well the roads are coming along that we paid for.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So the things that have not worked, the first requirement of creating a functioning state is security. If you can't secure and govern the people, there is no way that they're going to support the host nation government. And we have pretty strong evidence that we have not been able to secure and govern the Afghan people, and the Afghan government has not been able to. So for a few statistics, more than 70% of Afghans fear for their personal safety when they leave their house. And
Wow.
that's worse than it was last year and worse than the year before. And this is actually done with very good social science polling throughout the country. So we know that this data is pretty strong. About half of the people fear when they encounter international forces or even the Afghan army or police. So they fear the very security forces that are supposed to protect them. Those are a couple data points. Here are a few more. Civilian casualties have gotten worse almost every year since we started keeping robust track of civilian casualties in 2009. These are all monitored by the UN. They have elaborate techniques for verifying claims. And with one exception, there have been more civilians killed and wounded every year since 2009. That is not a sustainable strategy for securing and governing the Afghan people. We can get into the development if you like. Yes, the roads. We put $3 billion into roads and paved 1,000 kilometers of the roads, but then we turned the work of maintaining the roads over to the Afghans in 2013, and nothing has happened since then. So roughly 50% of the roads are unsuitable for heavy traffic now.
Well, one of the difficulties of this interview, Aaron, frankly, is that we have believed what you seem to believe for a very long time. And I want to be fair, ask some probing questions. But, you can watch a terrible football team lose a game completely, and there will be really good plays in the midst of that. So, we have done some good in Afghanistan. There's absolutely no doubt, and we're willing to talk about that sort of thing. But in terms of how the game is going, whether our core objectives will be fulfilled anytime soon, I don't think any reasonable person can disagree that things are going badly.
I think that's right. I don't think you'll find a serious national security commentator who will try to claim it's going well. The standard terms that are being used by the U.S. government to describe where we are right now in Afghanistan is either a stalemate or a stalemate that's backsliding. And in fact, just yesterday, the U.S. government released a quarterly report to Congress. The Department of Defense has to report every 3 months. And I'll just read to you. This is what came out yesterday of how things are going in Afghanistan. This is from the Department of Defense. The insurgency controls or exerts influence over a third of the population. Heavy casualties and capability gaps limit the effectiveness of the Afghan forces. Opium production stands near record levels. Illiteracy and poverty remain widespread. Corruption reaches into every aspect of national life. The rule of law has limited reach. Multiple obstacles deter investors and complicate business operations, and the ranks of the jobless grow as the economy stagnates. That's the Department of Defense's own assessment as of yesterday of progress in Afghanistan.
And it's interesting. So we've got 8 years of a Republican administration at this. Well, they were at it for, 6 or 7. 8 years of a Democrat, and now we got whatever Trump is, and he seems to believe he can fix it somehow. So it's a nonpartisan belief that we can go into a country like Afghanistan and make it into a country. Where does that come from?
Yeah, you're exactly right. It is nonpartisan, and I would just like to stress at the outset that actually our own analysis in this book is also nonpartisan. So we have hardcore Republicans and conservatives writing alongside diehard liberals and progressives, and all of us agree that the war is not going well. So let's not let it descend into partisan bickering about who's trying to score political shots by saying good things or bad things. No one thinks it's going well. The weird thing is there is a set of assumptions that undergird our efforts in Afghanistan that have been shared by Republicans and Democrats for years. And one of those key assumptions is that we can actually install liberal governance in illiberal lands. Both Presidents Bush and Obama believed this. So just 6 months into the war, President Bush gave a speech, this is in 2002, where he sketched out this elaborate progress agenda for Afghanistan that would involve rule of law, limits on the power of state, respect for women, private property, equal justice, religious tolerance. And he capped his speech by saying, no nation owns these principles, no nation is exempt from them, and we are going to actually bring them to Afghanistan. Of course that didn't happen. And when Obama came into office, the president did not make those big speeches about creating a whole democracy agenda in Afghanistan, but he still stuck to the core principle and the core assumption that even while there's an active insurgency, our foreign forces with guns can help create a government that will obey and abide by these liberal norms that developed over centuries in the West, and it hasn't worked well.
Aaron O'Connell is the author of Our Latest Longest War, Losing Hearts and Minds in Afghanistan. The strange thing to me about our continued presence in Afghanistan, one of the more intriguing things I learned in various political science lectures, was that democracies have a really hard time ending wars because national pride is at stake, and the voters don't want to, we don't want to be on the losing end. Dictators can end wars quickly because they say this is what's best and nobody can argue with them. The weird part of this one is that I don't think many Americans are particularly invested in the war at all. There's a chunk of America who's forgotten it's happening at all. So what the hell is the force propelling it?
Well, the force propelling it is a type of domino theory, not dissimilar to the one that we saw in Vietnam. It is in some cases reasonable, but it's still a hypothesis. It's still an attempt to predict the future. And it goes as follows. Yes, Afghanistan in itself is not going well, but it is this area, the border areas between Afghanistan and Pakistan, 20 of the internationally recognized U.S. government-sanctioned terrorist organizations, and there's about 100 total, 20 of them are in this area. So we have a vested national interest in making sure that neither Afghanistan nor these mountainous regions that are either in Afghanistan or Pakistan can become safe havens from which groups like al-Qaeda can launch attacks against us again. That's a valid national security interest. They attacked us from there once. Let's not let it happen again. What none of them have grappled with, neither the military nor the diplomats nor our official position as the U.S. government, is whether or not having U.S. troops there is making things better or making things worse. And so we stay year after year because we feel if we leave, the chances of those insurgent groups growing, threatening the Afghan state, threatening the Pakistani state, we deem that scenario too dangerous for our interests, but we don't know how to get either to a secure and governable Afghanistan, nor do we even know if our troops in the mountains is part of the problem or not.
Well, I'm so glad that you wrote this book, and the way things are politically in America right now, the fact that it spans two parties and two administrations, luckily allows for conversation to happen. Otherwise, it would be a completely partisan attack from one side or the other side claiming they could fix this. But so how are we going to end up getting out of there and giving up on it?
Right. Yeah. Well, okay. So to figure out what to do, let's just first start with what we most certainly should not do. So the first thing we shouldn't do is alienate our partners or cut money for diplomacy. Okay. Wars end when diplomats talk to other diplomats. We don't make peace with our friends. We make peace with our enemies. So that means you need to have engaged diplomacy, well-funded, well-organized diplomacy that can begin conversations not just with the Taliban, which is long overdue, but indeed with all the countries in the region that have their own serious national security interests. And that definitely includes Pakistan. It definitely includes India. It definitely includes other countries in the region. So the first step is let's focus on diplomacy because that's actually how wars end. The second thing we cannot do is alienate our partners. Afghanistan is a NATO mission. 40,000 troops there at the height of the surge were provided by NATO partners. These are large numbers. They're roughly a third of the troops there now. So to make silly statements about how NATO is obsolete or to say that NATO needs to pay their fair share, this misses the fact that NATO is carrying a heavy burden in Afghanistan. And if we can't get to a government that can secure and govern itself properly, we're going to need advisors and trainers. And that shouldn't be done exclusively by the United States.
Hey, I got a number of texts while we were talking, so I got to throw this out here. What percentage of a war continuing is the military-industrial complex? A combination of people profiting you're in the military, you spent your whole career preparing for a war, now you're in one, you like fighting it, that sort of thing. How much of that propels these things forward?
Yeah, so I don't think, first of all, you can never come up with a percentage, but I don't think the quote-unquote military-industrial complex perpetuates the war in Afghanistan. I don't think the desire by the defense industry to increase their profits translates into, well, then let's stay in Afghanistan longer. Just to give you a rundown of the spending, which is important for your listeners to know, we spend about $23 billion a year in Afghanistan, and almost all of that is Department of Defense costs, about 95%. We only spend, last year the State Department spent about $668 million. So 1/25 of the total funds spent are dedicated towards economic support and diplomacy and water, sanitation, education, human rights, and the rest is for our military operations and for training the Afghan army and police.
Interesting. Aaron O'Connell, author of our latest Longest War, Losing Hearts and Minds in Afghanistan. I feel like we could talk to you all day about this. Unfortunately, we know you don't have all day. But let's stay in touch. We'd love to talk again sometime.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
They spend all that money on training their troops, a third of which, he said, abandon their posts every year.
Yeah, and it sounded as if he wanted more of that training, and the diplomacy part I get. I find myself wondering how much of this is about neutralizing those who would take Pakistan's nukes, would disrupt or damage the Pakistan government to the point where they could steal some of the nukes. Because that's one thing we're doing. We're keeping the scumbags busy.
Well, then why doesn't somebody make that argument? Why didn't Bush make that argument, or Obama, or Trump?
I have no idea.
Make that argument to everybody. Look, we're not going to make this into a democracy. We just have to keep it kind of semi-afloat so that the nuclear power next door doesn't completely fall apart. That's what we're doing. I think a lot of people would say, oh, okay, I get that.
Yeah, the radicals will build an entire civilization and an army strong enough to threaten Pakistan.
Just don't give me any more speeches about girls going to school and roads and vibrant economy this and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Man, how many of the world's problems right now boil down to freaking nuclear bombs?
Well, a lot of people would say how many of the world's problems boil down to crazy religions, which doesn't factor into North Korea, but...
No.
Yeah,
By the way, if you have a soft, pliable skull, you're saying, that's why we want to eliminate, that's why we have to eliminate nukes. No nukes now. Genie's out of the bottle, man. You got to recognize that. It's like trying to get your virginity back. It doesn't work that way. I tell you what, you get rid of yours, and then I'll think about it. Nah, it's not going to happen.
So we're at year, 15 or 16 on Afghanistan, and we just sent in, it's only 300, but we're increasing the number currently.
Sure.
We're going
taking back briefly territories that we briefly had taken over before. Yes, well, on a lighter note, goat yoga is catching on. Becoming more and more popular.
I know a lot about this.
You're a fool if you don't open a studio.
And we've got a butter princess, a dairy princess, going to be in to churn butter later on the show because it's National Butter Day. Is that right?
Yeah, I guess so.
You're listening to the Armstrong and Getty Show. I'll hit you something. This will be good. This is the sort of thing, huh? This is completely different topic. Things women hate to see on social media. Postings from men women hate to see on social media. So if you're a dude trying to impress women, you got to stay away from these things.
And further proof that Facebook is evil.
Do we need more of that?
Probably not.
Stay tuned to the Armstrong and Getty Show. Marshall asked me if he should play this clip, and I didn't know the answer to it because I'm conflicted on it. Jimmy Kimmel last night on his show told what I understand is a fairly emotional story about his little baby needing open heart surgery, which
I heard about that.
Would be amazing. And I'm seeing clips up on the TV and everything like that. And Marshall said I've got a clip of his voice breaking up and everything like that, and that just seems like pornography to me. To play an out-of-context clip of somebody getting really emotional about a very serious thing.
It is cheap voyeurism on one level.
Yeah.
If you like Kimmel, you're fond of him. I am.
But how about
that would be an interesting insight, but
how
it's
about
not
the editing it down to here's the part where he can't keep his emotions together? What is that?
Well, he did 13
sad.
minutes, and he mixed in humor and jokes too.
No, I'm all for that. Well, first of all, he gets to do whatever he wants, but
right. Plus, he'd kill a whole segment of our show. Go ahead, roll it.
But just like here's the part where he couldn't keep it together anymore.
Yeah,
that just seems sick to me.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm not meant for show business with that attitude.
Voyeur America. Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe we'll play the clip. I don't know. Maybe Joe will talk me into it.
Well, why would I? I told you it's sick.
Sick?
It ends up being a positive, though, and I think it's notable to be that emotional, candid.
About your baby needing open heart surgery? Yeah, you'd be emotional. Yeah, well, that is part of... Yeah, well, I'm not going to analyze Jimmy Kimmel's appeal, but he is an appealing character, partly because he is unguarded.
Reader's Digest did a survey, 9 things women wish men would stop posting on social media. So maybe you think this is helping you romantically, but it's not. Women don't want shirtless workout pictures. It's an interesting thing to me. I have not known a woman who doesn't think it's weird or gross when men go shirtless. Even good-looking men.
Or they're just trying too hard.
They're put off by men going shirtless.
Yeah.
I've heard, without exception, girlfriends, my wife, people I've known, they just, Yet you see guys with no shirt on all the time. I think, thinking that.
Sean, do you walk down the street shirtless sometimes? Grab a little tan?
Not anymore.
T-shirt in hand?
I'm kind of grown up now.
Yeah.
But I don't know, there's part of I think that might be the guy version of the argument that women don't dress up to impress other men, they dress up to impress other women. Maybe some
so
of the...
you're gay, is what you're saying.
No,
that's cool. Hey, that's fine.
I didn't say that at all. But but no, I think maybe it's you're peacocking a little bit, right? You're maybe trying to intimidate the others from even attempting to talk to the woman you're talking to. I don't know.
Look at my moves. I can swing in them opposite directions.
Oh, jeez.
Well, what about Magic Mike, Channing Tatum going shirtless, Chippendales? Women go crazy for that stuff.
That's because that was in the script of the movie. They were actors. They were paid to do that.
Women don't want to see your social networking posts about your drinks from a night out. Okay.
I do that one every now and then. Like if I'm at a various bar and I get like a weird imported bottle. Oh, look at this thing. What's up with this drink? But yeah, that's about it.
Women don't want to
hold the bottle up in front of your bare chest.
Women don't want to see a novel length description of how perfect their relationship is on social media. They talking about their own relationship or somebody else's relationship? I don't know.
Nobody wants to see that in general.
Yeah, you're right. Nobody wants to see that. Women don't want to see your drunken activities. Again, that's for other men. You're not doing that thinking you're impressing women. No. The shirtless photo, you'd almost have to be trying to impress women with that. Surely you're not trying to impress your dude friends. I'm talking about heterosexuals here.
Sean says yes.
Well, it's not on
a selfie.
You're not trying to impress them. You're trying to show how awesome you are. Or I guess that is trying to impress them.
Sounds like impress.
But no,
you're
I don't know.
You got the mallet.
It's not a fully formed thought.
Get the mallet.
No, it's true though.
That was on Vince. Vince got gone.
How much progress you made, how much work you put in.
And is there any guy that wants to see that from another guy?
Maybe they
wow,
get
your
inspired.
pecs are looking good. You both are gay. Just get together and have sex. That's fine. I don't care. But you're gay. I'm not talking about you two. I'm talking about the guy who's posting his pectorals so the other guy can say, wow, your pectorals look awesome.
Right.
It's just, I don't know. Women don't want a play-by-play of any sports game on social media. We're not doing it for you. Pictures of their car. Well, you're taking all the fun out of life, ladies.
Yeah, no kidding. Hey, are we allowed to have friends? You oppressive bitch. Oh, you know what? I'm so sorry.
What they don't want...
I went too far.
They don't want to see men having enjoyment without them. If this car brings him joy, he should only get joy from me.
You know?
You don't have to be so snotty.
I don't agree with that, but I know men much like me who agree with that completely.
It's like, wow. Look at that stupid man and having fun with sporting events. He should get fun from women like me.
I think some women, I heard this from a friend who is much like my personality.
I see.
Who believes that some women are annoyed by anything that is bringing you enjoyment other than them. Or without them.
Yes. Does that somehow, is the fact that so many women like to have a gay friend, a gay male friend, is that further proof of the same principle? That there's a dude who likes womany stuff. Finally.
Yeah, I could see that.
It's got to factor in. If only we had a woman to speak to this topic.
Yeah.
1-866-331-TALK. We're going to take calls for the rest of the show. What? Sean, get ready. 1-866-331-TALK.
I'll pose this as a question. Would you say in general, in a heterosexual male-female relationship,
yes,
romantic relationship, that it is more or less acceptable for a woman to call a man's interests and hobbies as dumb or boring?
Mm-hmm.
whereas it does not work the other direction?
I don't know.
You guys in your cars, just so dumb.
I know
Can
how
you
it's
imagine
portrayed in like pop culture, the way you're describing.
How often have you seen it in real life? I'm just asking. Where a man would say to a group of women, "Your reading group's so stupid. You sit around, blah blah blah."
Having a midlife crisis, getting together, drinking wine, and reading a book. Right.
You're not going to see that.
No,
doesn't work that way.
Yeah, much more common to see the dismissive, oh, you still like sports, huh? Little boys things.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Well, whatever. I don't agree with that, but I know people like me who do.
I didn't know you could tap dance. That's really something else. In tennis shoes, no less.
I'm Ben Shapiro. This is The Ben Shapiro Show. Things I like, we've been doing plays and great American plays. Probably the greatest American play, it's either between this or Streetcar Named Desire, is Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller. Arthur Miller is very often incredibly heavy-handed, but Death of a Salesman is him at his least heavy-handed. It's still, if you want to see a lot of the motives that are driving the Trump movement, actually, you can watch Death of a Salesman and it sort of explains it. The idea of the breakdown of the family, the breadwinner who can no longer win bread for his family, and he's depressed and upset about it. And here's a little bit of the production with John Malkovich and Dustin Hoffman.
Why am I always being contradicted?
Well, I wanted it to be a surprise.
Why don't you open a window in here, for God's sake? The way they boxed us in here, bricks and windows and bricks.
We should have bought the land next door.
The street is lined with cars. There's not a breath of fresh air in the neighborhood. The grass don't grow anymore. You can't raise a carrot in the backyard. They should have had a law against apartment houses. Remember those two beautiful elm trees out there when I and Biff hung the swing between them? Huh?
Like being a million miles from the city.
They should have arrested the builder for cutting those down. They massacred the neighborhood. More and more I think of those days, Linda. This time of year, it was lilacs and wisteria, and then the peonies would come out, daffodils. What fragrance in this room?
Well, people had to move somewhere.
No, there's more people now.
No, I don't think there's more.
There's more people! That's what's ruining this country! Population is getting out of control! The competition is maddening! Smell the stink from that apartment house and another on the other side!
Okay, so this has been something that's been boiling in America for a long time, is this disaffected group of people who feel left behind by the modern economy. That doesn't mean that they're right. Okay, Arthur Miller was actually a socialist, and it's important to recognize that a lot of the motivating factors behind what's going on from Trump and also from Bernie Sanders, this idea that government is going to take care of you, that government is going to come in and stop the wheels of capitalism and save your job and save your neighborhood, it's just not true. In America, it's a free country, and it's up to you to save yourself. That doesn't mean that everybody can succeed in saving themselves, unfortunately, and that's why we as a community need to get together in the private sphere and help people who can. I don't think that's up to government either. I think that's up to us. But this is a visceral look at a phenomenon that has obviously grown and metastasized over time in some pretty negative ways. Again, Trump is not the same as Bernie Sanders, but there's a lot to the idea that there's this disaffected population of people who feel left behind by the system as it grows. Okay, other things that I like. So I have to hand it to Stephen Colbert. Normally, I'm not a Stephen Colbert fan. I've mocked him multiple times. Stephen Colbert did a fantastic segment last night in which he mocked the living crap out of Rachel Maddow. He was making fun of Rachel Maddow's, big routine where she supposedly was going to break Donald Trump's tax returns. He was going to finish Trump. It was the silver bullet. And here's Colbert making fun of her. It's actually really, really good.
I hold in my hand something very significant. It is a joke. A joke that we have confirmed has been heard by Donald Trump. We believe this is the first time any joke connected with Donald Trump has been released. This is an old joke from before he was president. We've obtained this joke legally. The First Amendment gives us the right to tell this joke. This piece of paper I hold in my hand, the part facing me with the words that you can't see. This is the document with the joke. The joke in question. Why did the chicken... But first, a word on chickens. Chickens are flightless. birds domesticated 3,000 years ago in Mesopotamia. They produce both meat and eggs, as well as companionship. They are eaten by people. People like Russian oligarch Dmitry Rybolovlev, riboflavin, Rama Lama Ding Dong, Rubble Rubble Rutro. He's a Russian with confirmed ties to chickens. More on that later when I discuss it with this chicken expert. But back to the joke. Why did the chicken cross the road? Okay, what are roads? Why do we need them? Do tax dollars pay for roads? They do. What can be a road? Is it a highway? Is it a road? Is it a track, a via, a tollway? A thoroughfare or a public way traveled by foot, cart, car, truck, bus, bicycle, and of course, other. And where is this road crossing chicken going? Mar-a-Lago? Is it going to Russia to be Chicken Kiev? These are important questions.
Okay, so it's really good. It just shows you that what Colbert does is not what Colbert should actually be doing for a living, right? So Colbert doing the late night hosting gig like he's Letterman or like he's Leno, it's actually really stupid. What he should be doing, because he's great at this is a dead-on Rachel Maddow impersonation with the hand motions and the broken. I'm midst of the train of thought. I'm just reminded of things that just occurred to me. Right? It's perfect. He's right on here. He did it to O'Reilly, and it was really effective when he was at Comedy Central. That's what he should be doing for a living, not the thing he's currently doing for a living. That's really funny stuff. And you know that the left is eating its own when Stephen Colbert is taking on Rachel Maddow. Okay, time for a couple of things that I hate. So first off, a California elementary school has now banned tag. Apparently, they're concerned that it will hurt feelings and people are getting hurt. They say after 4 children in 4th and 5th grade at Gold Ridge Elementary in Folsom were deemed to have played the game with too much physical contact, all physical contact in the schoolyard was banned. The principal notified 4 parents their kids had been warned about being too rough. So today we implemented new procedures at school aimed at reducing physical contact and related problem behaviors. Okay, if you think that you're going to stop little boys from pushing each other and punching each other and running around hitting each other, then you have never met a little boy. But it just demonstrates that, Christina Hoff Sommers has said this, we are now making a full-scale societal attempt to treat little boys as though they are little girls. Like they're going to sit around and talk to each other in little group circles, and it ain't going to happen. Again, this is training a society of uncomfortable children who are unable to actually have fun on the playground, which is really stupid. Other things that I hate, there's a rapper named Bow Wow, which is just great. I guess he's the nephew to Snoop Dogg, is how this works. And Bow Wow is very upset that Donald Trump is upset with Snoop Dogg for threatening to kill Donald Trump in a video. And so Bow Wow has now threatened to pimp Melania. It says, "Ayo, real Donald Trump, shut your punk ass up talking bleep about my uncle Snoop Dogg before we pimp your wife and make her work for us." Can you imagine if anybody on the right had ever said they wanted to pimp Michelle Obama? You know, like make her into a sex slave? Okay, this guy has not been banned from Twitter yet. This tweet is still up. It's amazing. Twitter will allow pretty much anything from the left, but they will allow a lot of things on the right they will not allow. They'll ban a lot of people who I find personally despicable, but have certainly not said stuff as bad as this. They banned Milo Yiannopoulos for doing stuff that was way less evocative than this. But Bow Wow continues to have a verified Twitter account after saying that he wants to pimp the First Lady of the United States because the President of the United States was upset with a video about his assassination from Snoop Dogg, demonstrating once again the double standard from left and leftist corporations. Okay, a few entries from the mailbag. So we begin today with Nicholas. He says, "Hey, Ben, do you think the government should be funding space exploration and NASA, or do you think the money would be better spent on other things?" So, Nicholas, I actually do not think that the government should be behind space exploration and NASA. I think the private sector can do it. SpaceX is actually doing a lot of the best private exploration of space that's happening right now. There is a lot of money to be made in space exploration, and the idea that the government has to be behind it, I find foolish unless it's for military purposes. If you're saying that we have to, explore space for military purposes, that's a different thing. But if you're saying that we ought to explore space just to explore space because we think space is cool, no, I don't think the government actually has to be behind that. And this idea that the greatest accomplishment of mankind was putting a man on the moon ever. and the suggestion that shows that government is the greatest thing because government put a man on the moon. Again, would a man have gone to the moon without government? Yeah, I do think a man would have gone to the moon without government eventually. It might not have happened as quickly because when you take up everybody's wealth and you dump it into a program designed to put a man on the moon, you can do it faster. And it is cool that we put a man on the moon and all. But the idea that that is a vital service that is provided under the Constitution of the United States, don't see that, unless you're talking about its possible military uses, and there are some, as Donald Trump's, I think he's talking about anti-missile programs that use space. That's a military purpose. Patrick says, live, is it possible the new generation will be conservative by the way they see the left act now, or are they going to see it as the new normal? I do think that there is a possibility that the left is going to go so far that the next generation is going to react to that, and I think you're starting to see that on college campuses. I spoke at University of Redlands yesterday. We had 900 people paid to come to see it. And they would have filled up the balcony, too, except that the school wouldn't allow them to use the balcony because they were afraid for safety reasons, I guess. But, yeah, there's a real backlash happening to the hard left in this country, and it is threatening the ability of the left to control the next generation. Chapman says, hey, Ben, do you think a single-payer system in America is inevitable? It seems like Republicans are just giving up free markets because they don't want to look mean. Do I think it's inevitable? I don't think anything is inevitable. As they say in Terminator 2, your fate is what you make of it. But I do think that it is more likely than not that sometime in the next couple of decades you will see a strong move toward nationalized health care, because once people think that an entitlement is on the table, they want more of the entitlement, and they don't understand the downsides to a non-private market-based system. If you are going to have a private-public system, then it should look more like Switzerland and less like what we currently have. But I'm not of the view that people should be forced to buy health care under any circumstances anyway. Nope says, why is it that the assassination attempts aren't very well publicized? I got all the way through college without knowing Ronald Reagan, George Bush, and Bill Clinton had an assassination attempt on their lives. Well, I mean, we pay a lot more attention to successful terrorist attacks than failed terrorist attacks. We pay more attention to successful murders than we do to attempted murders. So, I don't think that, that there have been assassination attempts on a bevy of presidents. There wasn't on Obama, as far as I know, but there was on George W., there was on H.W., there was on Clinton, there was on Reagan, there was on Gerald Ford. I'm not aware if there was one on Jimmy Carter or not. Obviously, the ones that succeed are the ones that we pay attention to. Andrew, do you think the left should have to use milk of the poppy to help with the pain and butthurt of Trump being president? Well, since they do live in an alternative universe where Donald Trump is going to be not president, maybe they live in Game of Thrones universe. That's possible. Love me some Game of Thrones. Okay, John says, hey, Ben. I'm 26. My younger brother has autism. As he gets older, we are trying to figure out the best way to set up some future for him. What role do you think the government should have as far as taking care of the mentally handicapped? Well, I think that the private sector should fill as much of this as possible. I think charitable organizations exist that help people who have mental handicaps. I do think that there is a role for government in taking care of people who can't take care of themselves. The people who are mentally disabled, and there's no community structure for them. People who have violent schizophrenia, people who have serious mental illness. I've called for a long time actually for additional state funding for people who are mentally ill. I think that's one of the things that's been really troublesome, because you're talking about here people who can't take care of themselves, not the same thing as a healthcare system where people can make fully informed decisions. Lizzie says, I'm a junior at a public high school. I was forced to take the ACT. To my dismay, it measured only a small subset of skills. To what extent, if any, do you think standardized testing is useful, and how should it in college admissions be reformed, if at all? Well, Lizzie, I think that's why a lot of college admissions standards also include essays now, and they include extracurriculars. But to pretend that the ACT and the SAT aren't important is to ignore the fact that they basically are a small form IQ test. The truth is that the government doesn't allow people to give IQ tests in order to decide employment or college admissions, but that's basically what the SAT and the ACT are. There's very high correlation between how you do on these tests and how you measure on IQ tests, and the government has attempted to get rid of IQ tests. You end up with these bad proxies. Peter says, my name is Peter. I'm a transgender person. I think I might be the only conservative one out there. You're not actually, Peter. I believe it or not, I actually get letters all the time, almost every day, from transgender people who are conservative and have questions about my position on this. I was wondering if you had any advice for defending myself against liberals who call me a self-hating transphobic bigot simply because I don't think we as trans folks should get special privileges. And my advice is that, just like I say to everyone in the United States, you don't have to care what other people think. Just because people on the left want you to be a certain way doesn't mean you have to be a certain way. Just because, as a trans person, you think that my opinion is wrong doesn't mean you don't have to listen to me. Right? You don't have to think that I'm right. You don't have the right to tell me what to think. You don't have the right to tell me what to say or what to do. But you have the right, certainly, to ignore me. And I think that if we all ignored each other a little bit more in certain ways, it might be a better thing. Someone asks, how old will your children be when you introduce them to guns? Honestly, it's not something that I have thought about too much yet because they're still really little. One's 3 and one's 10 months. And we do have a gun safe. We keep the guns locked up, obviously, and away from the kiddies. But I'd want to talk to some of my friends over at the NRA and see what they advise on that. Okay, final question here. Jeffrey says, hey, Ben, do you believe in general love and marriage should be unconditional, as is said during a wedding? The logical side of me says no, but the forever alone part of me who hopes to get married one day says yes. To me, there are acts one can do which aren't deserving of love and can't strip that away. If, in your opinion, love is conditional, could you get behind a protest to abolish the dialogue from wedding ceremonies? Well, I don't think that the wedding ceremony, its language says unconditional. It says in sickness and health, for richer, for poorer, for better, for worse. I don't think that's unconditional. I don't think it says if your wife goes and nails the entire Stanford football team, for example. So, the idea that love is unconditional is a leftist conceit. Love is not unconditional. God's love for mankind is unconditional. Your love for your child until they're responsible for themselves is unconditional. The love of adults for other adults, that is not unconditional because behavior decides whether you are deserving of love. You should deserve love. You shouldn't rely on other people's kindness to bring you that love. Okay, before we finish, last thing, I promise, that is, I do have another joke for you. I have a joke to conclude the week. So, a fat guy is sitting on a plane, and he's smoking a cigar, and next to him is a lady, and she has a little dog, and the little dog starts barking, and the fat guy with the cigar, he says, lady, can you shut up the dog? And she says, yes, but please put out the cigar. So he puts out the cigar, and she shuts up the dog. A few minutes later, the dog starts barking again, so he lights up his cigar again. And the lady says, can you put out that cigar? And he says, shut up your dog. She shuts up the dog, he puts out the cigar. The dog starts barking again, so he lights up his cigar again. And the dog just won't stop barking. So he takes the dog, he opens the window of the plane, he throws the dog out the window of the plane. She takes his cigar, and in a fit of rage, she throws that out the plane as well. And then, oddly enough, she looks out the window, and there, on the wing of the plane, is the dog. And what do you think is in the dog's mouth? The brick. I'm Ben Shapiro. This is The Ben Shapiro Show. On Monday, the New York Board of Regents announced it would dump the academic literacy skills test. They didn't dump the test, which was designed to test teachers on reading ability in order to raise standards, because there was anything wrong with the test per se. They dumped it because too many minority teachers were failing it. One of the members of the task force that looked at the teacher certification test, Professor Leslie Sudak of Pace University, said, quote, having a white workforce really doesn't match our student body anymore. It turns out that according to ABC News, 54% of Hispanics and 59% of blacks who took the test failed it on the first try, as opposed to 36% of whites. Does that mean the test was racist? Nope. A federal judge in New York, not exactly a bastion of conservatism, ruled the test was fine. That wasn't enough, though, for the state of New York, where it's more important that your teacher is black than that your teacher can read and understand material. Sudak's comments were echoed by National Council on Teacher Quality President Kate Walsh, who summarily dismissed test results. Quote, there's not a test in the country that doesn't have a disproportionate performance on the part of blacks and Latinos. But she acknowledged that getting rid of the test would be a step in the wrong direction. Here is the problem. The students. There's this weird notion on the left that students learn better from teachers of equal quality so long as the teacher shares a race with those students. A good deal of research finds weak or no evidence to substantiate that claim, and that's assuming the teachers are of equal quality. There is no evidence, none, zippo zilch, that an inferior teacher of the same race is better for a student than a superior teacher of a different race, yet it's that latter hypothesis New York wants to now pursue. So New York State now wants to sublimate the interests of its students to the interests of political correctness. Better for a black kid to have a black teacher who failed the ALST than to have a white teacher who passed it. Statistically, of course, this means a higher likelihood the black kid will have an underqualified teacher than a white kid, since we're now attempting to race sort rather than to hire meritorious teachers. That creates new intergenerational pathologies of failed education, for which, presumably, the left will blame white racism and test discrimination without evidence. Meanwhile, the kids continue to fail. Well done, New York. I'm Ben Shapiro. This is The Ben Shapiro Show.